Hey, what is up guys? KJ Kitty here, back at you with another video. And in today's video I'm going to be telling you guys on how to tune in Forza Horizon 5. This is a quick video. There's way better videos that will explain way more in depth than me, but I'm just going to make this quick and sweet. So the first section we got tire pressure. So typically you want, for most cars, especially with less downforce, you want to be able to turn into a corner the way you want. So usually people would like to lean towards the front tires having more PSI than the rear, just by like 1 or 2 points, which this will cost a little bit of grip, but in return it will give you more responsiveness for the front tires, which can initiate that turn and you'll hit the apex way easier. And if your car is still understeery, I'll get into the other options, but usually you want this tire pressure to be within 1 to 2 points higher than the rear. Sometimes in extreme cases with cars that don't like to steer much, they're very understeery, they can't turn, they'll just hit a wall or something. You could definitely make the front tire pressure 3 to 4 points higher, and then anything over that is a little overkill, so I wouldn't really recommend anything past that. So for gearing it's pretty simple. See that red line right there at the bottom right? So usually you want those white lines to fit in with the red line, and then you'll be making the most out of your powertrain. If you go beyond the red line like this, thinking you're going to have a higher top speed, it actually made my top speed lower because it depends on the car's torque in the gears, and usually, well, actually, now that I see it, it actually makes the top speed higher, but it actually takes longer to get up to speed. So if I were to do this, you could see the 0 to 60 actually went to 3 seconds, and initially it was 2.9 seconds. So it will cost you a lot of acceleration, especially in lower torque cars. Turbocharged cars, they have lags, so in the higher RPMs you'll be getting most of the torque, and lower RPMs, like if you have a longer gear in the lower RPMs, that could be a problem, especially in a race or a drag race, or yeah, even a circuit race. Definitely turning the corners, that could be a problem, and it could cost you a race or several if you do not fix that immediately. So you want to stay within the sweet spot. If you're doing circuit racing, shorter gears are usually the way to go, but I like keeping it in between. It depends from car to car. Like I said, with the torque, you want to check your car's pound-feet of torque, which if you want to do that, you have to either go in the car menu, or you go and tune your car and you could check your car's powertrain and where it hits that torque. I'll actually show you guys what I mean right here. So if you guys go to power, right, you guys just hit a power option, you toggle it with whatever platform you're on. I'm on PC with a controller, so it's Xbox controls. So press Y to toggle, and you will see the performance graph right here, and the torque is the pink. So as you can see, right before we hit about 5 grand or 5,000 RPM, you'll see that we spike in our torque, and then we just go down from there. This is a turbocharged car, so it's going to have turbo lag in the very early RPMs. From up to like 3 RPM, it's going to be very weak in terms of torque and power, and then you're going to get a surge of power and torque, and you typically want your gears to go within that RPM range. You can always tweak this in free mode. What I like to do is I like to go around a track, like a track that I know by heart, which there's a track near this house that I'm at right now, and I just go around that track 10 times, and I just kind of tune it accordingly to whatever fits my driving style, and then I'll fix it like that. So that's for gearing. You kind of want to make sure that your car's gearing kind of fits in with the torque and the RPMs and all that. You see actually the graph right here on the left, how it says 049, and then on the bottom it has the miles per hour. That is actually the RPM. So you kind of, like I said, 3,000 RPM is the weakest point. So you see how each gear after the first gear is above 3,000 RPM. You kind of want to do that. So I hope people understand how I'm saying that, but if you guys don't, leave a question in the comments. Hope that made sense, guys. Let's move on to alignment. So alignment, guys, usually I keep the camber at -2 degrees, sometimes -3 degrees, but -2 degrees and -0.5 for the rear. But sometimes, like especially in front wheel drive cars, I like to put a little bit more camber in it so I can turn those corners at a very high speed. I'm not really experienced with the camber and the alignment settings, but one thing I can tell you guys that's a little confusing for most is front caster. So caster is pretty much angle that in which your suspension is pointing towards. So the higher the caster you have, typically your suspension is gonna be more in the back of the front tires. This is only goes for the front suspension. So this is gonna affect your launches. So say you guys launch a car in a race and it turns to the right or the left and it's kind of hard to get back into control. Well, what front caster does, it kind of likes to keep it in a straight line when you take off, and when you initiate a bit of power onto it, it definitely makes a little difference. It's not a very important setting, but I say anything above 6 degrees is typically what I like going with. Maybe if you want like a bit more responsiveness, you might want to go down, have lower caster, but typically most cars come with about 5 degrees caster, and higher end cars you will notice that they have about 6 to 7 degrees caster, which makes them more stable at higher speeds and when they take off in the very beginning of a race. So that's alignment. So what we got for NT roll bars. So this is a little different for me compared to everybody else's, or what everyone else is going to say in their videos. But the reason being for this is I'm in a four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering car, which is a Skyline GTR 34. But say I'm in a Mustang or something, right? Just a car like that. Typically, if I'm in a Mustang and I'm getting understeer issues, I kind of want to make the front more softer than the rear. The rear, you kind of want to make it a little stiff, but you don't want to run into a crowd. That's going to be bad, especially if you're in a Mustang. You don't want to do that. So you typically, if you want to turn into a corner better, this will actually help you initiate that corner really fast. Like this is mid-corner handling right here for anti-roll bars. And beginning of the corner. This will make sure your car's very stable. It doesn't lean to one side when you're hitting the corner, which can make it less responsive. So if you stiffen the rear, soften the front, this will make the car, like especially if you're in a rear-wheel drive car, you kind of, it's usually flipped in a front-wheel drive car. It's like this with a front-wheel drive car. I believe I will get to that in a bit. So, but usually you want to go around here. But for all-wheel drive, four-wheel steering cars, or even Subarus for that matter, specifically, for whatever reason, if you stiffen the front and soften the rear, in some of these four-wheel drive Japanese cars, you'll notice that they handle extremely well and they hit the corners very perfectly. They fit it like a glove, and I can't really tell you guys other than there's power going to all wheels, so maybe the front being stiff and the back being soft, maybe that has to do with swinging the back out, but there's still power going to the back, which can make it actually turn the corner pretty nicely. But this is usually flipped like this, unless you're in a front-wheel drive car, like I said. I think it's around here. I'll get to that though, guys. Yeah, so that's anti-roll bars. This is a very important setting to enable on your guys' cars, or a very important setting to tweak on cars. So for springs, this is another very important setting, just as important as anti-roll bars in my opinion. Springs kind of work with anti-roll bars. These make sure your springs are stiff. Anti-roll bars was the bars reducing your car's body roll. So these springs are actually going to help you. They're going to pretty much keep the car way more stiff Like, I can't find a better way to explain this, but if you hit the power and you have really stiff rear suspension, yeah, it's going to be very unstable because it's very stiff in the rear. You kind of want to make it to where it's kind of even and balanced. You usually want to make sure with most builds that the front springs are softer than the rear springs, just by a little bit, for four-wheel steering cars like the car I'm in right now, the GTR. For ride height, you don't want to lower this all the way unless your car has wiggle room, which this car, I believe, may have a little bit, but I don't want to be too comfortable with that because that could cost a lot of performance and a lot of cornering stability, which you could actually lose control if you bottom out, and that could cause understeer, which understeer is nobody's friend. I can tell you guys that much right now. Oversteer in Forza is your guys' friend, so you guys want to make sure you guys lean towards a bit of oversteer, but not too much, because you don't want to go overboard with oversteer. You kind of just want to have more steering flexibility rather than having less, which is always good for hitting corners properly, especially if you can control the car under acceleration and through a corner. So anyways, guys, we go to dampening, and dampening is a setting that is not as important, but it can be if you guys have no other choice. Usually I never touch dampening. This can change a lot of characteristics about how the car performs and how it handles under accelerations and bumps and different surfaces. You typically want to keep this stock unless your car is not acting the way you want it to, and you mess with every other setting and you have no other choice. So if that's the case, guys, so it's reverse. So for the front is actually going to add more grip to the rear. For the rear, it's going to add more grip to the front, which in return increases oversteer. For the front, it increases understeer. It's almost like, especially if you guys have no aero installed and your car's very unstable, usually you would want to stiffen the front so your rear tires actually have more grip. It's very weird to explain because it's flipped and not a lot of people really understand it. That is the best way. I don't really understand it much. I've used it in the past and I noticed, and even reading this description right here can tell you quite a bit, but it can be a little confusing, so I hope I'm making this more understandable for you guys. But that is kind of what I got from messing with these settings in the past. You usually want to make sure that the bump stiffness is about 50% to 75% of what the rebound stiffness is. The bump stiffness has to be at around that point where it's kind of like that, just like a straight line up. But sometimes you might have to just say your car is not steering properly or whatever. You want to add like 2 points to that, because if you go like overboard with it, right, that can actually cause the car to be very unstable, especially on bumps, and that can cost a lot of performance that you guys may not even realize at first. But that is it's very touchy. These settings are very touchy, especially with alignment. I didn't explain toe because toe is one of those settings, kind of just like dampening. Toe is very interesting. I never use toe because it makes your car very unstable. Even if you barely tweak it by a degree or so, it can really mess with the car's handling, and it can make the car's tires heat up faster, and also it can do quite a bit to your performance and you may not even realize it. But usually keep the toe stock, you'll be alright, but sometimes you might want to do a toe out in the rear or something. But I'm in a four-wheel steering car. I especially don't need to be messing with toe, but if you guys are in a rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive car, it might be useful to do the toe out in the rear or the toe in. I'm not really well versed on the toe angle, but I kind of know how it works. It's a setting I never liked using, and I used it in the past. It ended up making my car uncontrollable for me, and I play on a controller. If you guys play on keyboard or a steering wheel, that might be a little different for you guys. That might actually be better. I don't know, but I'm speaking for mainly controller users, which makes up the vast majority of people, and that's what I play on. So that's what I can tell you guys about. I would say dampening is a little bit more important than toe angle. Dampening can really change the characteristics of your car for the better or for the worse. Typically, you do not want to, like I said before, you do not want to touch this unless you have to, unless there's no other choice. You mess with differential, aero. Usually, if you have aero, you wouldn't be messing with dampening at all. But if you don't have aero settings, like me, you have a purist build, yeah, sometimes this might be the way to go. But usually keep it stock. If you notice the car isn't handling the way you need it to handle, you can always mess with the settings. And if you don't like it, I believe you can set them to default, or you can set them back. You just remember the numbers that they were at and set them back to where they were. So that's dampening. For aero, pretty self-explanatory. So if you have more front downforce, your car will be more suction to the ground, which more front means you go more towards cornering, obviously, and what that'll do is make your car respond to a turn very quickly, and that could be good or bad, but mainly it could be good. But it's almost a little too much for me. I never get front aero for a lot of my cars. I don't actually remember a car that I actually put front aero on. Rear aero is a lot more important though, guys. Usually I like doing rear aero directed all the way towards speed. This will make sure I don't lose a lot of acceleration and top speed when I enable aero. And what it mainly, rear aero lowers your PI, which can actually make you put more power in the car at a lesser cost, which you could keep it within a class like A class and say I'm topping out at like 400 horsepower. That's not going to be enough for me, right? I put a spoiler on it. It takes away like 9-10 points. I can put like an extra fuel system in it, or an engine block upgrade, or like an intake upgrade or something. So rear downforce is very useful, but if you guys are actually trying to use it for its function, usually you want to go towards cornering, which will put more grip on the rear tires, which will make your car more understeery. That's why you fix all these settings back here, like anti-roll bars and springs and tires. That will make sure your car's rear wheels don't spin as much, and they'll be more planted to the ground at the cost of course, there's going to be some understeer. Also for dampening, before I move on, dampening is the alternative if you guys do not want to do aero and you guys are having problems with your car handling kind of like crap. This can actually help you quite a bit if you guys don't have aero. So like I said, if you guys are having problems turning into a corner, or if you guys are having problems with too much responsiveness and it oversteers a little too much, so simply for understeer, you want to stiffen the front a little bit for both of these settings. Stiffen the front for both of these settings if you want more understeer. If you guys want more oversteer, which is I believe that would be more people, right? So for people that want more turning in responsiveness, they want to stiffen the rear for both of these just by like a couple points. Don't go crazy, do that, you know. Just keep it short and sweet. Unlike this video, it's already too long, I think. But you guys already know. That is that. I hope I explained that better. Like I said, you guys could go in the comments, and I would be glad to get back to you guys when I can. So for braking, I never really touched this. Maybe that's a bad thing. I can't really tell you much about braking. Braking's braking. I kind of just keep them the way it is. It can actually affect your entering corner speed, which can actually help you in a race, but not by a lot. Usually I just do 50-50 brakes, and 100% pressure. Works for me. I won quite a bit of races like that. So I mean, yeah. Anyway, for the grand finale, the most important setting for a car, the one setting other than tires that I like to tune before I even touch the car on the road, which is differential. Differential can determine how your car drives and how it accelerates and how it decelerates. So so let's say at first it's more common for people to have rear wheel drive cars in this game. So first I'm going to be going rear. So for rear wheel drive, if you guys are having problems with understeer, you guys kind of want to lock the differential a little bit more, go towards the high end. You guys don't want to go too far. What it pretty much does is just make sure your wheels spin at a similar rate, and when you go higher up they start spinning at a similar rate, which can help you turn into a corner maybe a little too much. You don't want to go crazy with it, guys, so stay in between. This is what I chose for my settings, which I think this is a little low for an all-wheel drive car, but for a rear-wheel drive car, 48 is a little too much. I would probably, at most for a rear-wheel drive car, typically go around like 30% is the sweet spot for rear-wheel drive cars. And then for deceleration, what I've been doing is you see a trend with the deceleration actually being half of what the acceleration is, and that's like almost the exact opposite, obviously, acceleration and deceleration. So you want to just make that half of what the acceleration is. So 48%, 24 is half of 48. 10% acceleration for the front is an all-wheel drive car. Obviously, you do 5% for the rear. And also, I guess since we're on an all-wheel drive car, I can show you guys the center differential balance, which usually, guys, you guys never want to go front unless you guys are doing like some kind of off-road build. Maybe you want to go more towards the front. It will have a bit more pull to it. It will behave more like a front-wheel drive car, to be expected. But usually for me, for everyone, I should say, they're usually going to go for more rear bias, which is fine. It actually helps your car accelerate better. If you do a little too much rear balance, it's almost useless that you even have all-wheel drive, but you could actually use that to your advantage. Because if the car already handles well in rear-wheel drive and you swap it to all-wheel drive, you just need a little bit more grip around the corner. It actually might be really smart to just do like 90 to 95% in the rear, just so you have a little bit of traction in the front that could pull you through a corner just fine. For native rear-wheel drive cars, you kind of want to do 70, 75, maybe even 80% for center balance differential. So that would wrap it up. If you guys have any questions, I will do my best to reply with the best of my knowledge and my ability. So let me know in the comments if you guys have any questions. And yeah, if there's anything I missed, let me know as well. This is my first video in a long time that I actually am doing a voiceover commentary for, and I kind of just want to shed a little bit of my knowledge, and hopefully this was kind of a simple video to follow. Probably not, and I apologize for that. But if you guys did learn something, feel free to drop a like, and if you guys want to see more of my videos, subscribe. KJ Kitty, guys. Peace.